In today's podcast, we're hopping aboard the tastiest tour in Dublin. Today's podcast is sponsored by WiFiCandy.ie because traveling is sweeter when connected. Personal Wi-Fi devices with easy pickup at Dublin Airport or delivery to your first accommodation, and postage paid envelope included for easy return. Use discount code IFV, that's IFV, for Ireland Family Vacations at checkout to save 10%. And stay connected in Ireland with Wi-Fi Candy. Now, let's learn about a Dublin tour that you're going to want to add to your itinerary. Thank you everyone so much for joining me again here on the Traveling in Ireland podcast. Today I have a very tasty interview for you with Karen Nixon, who is the owner of Vintage Tea Tours in Dublin. Now, afternoon tea is probably the tastiest tradition in the British Isles, but Karen has taken that tradition and added a very unique twist. So Karen, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I'm really excited to learn about Vintage Tea Tours.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Vintage Tea Tours takes that afternoon tea tradition and kind of turns it into an experience that you're not going to find really anyplace else. Can you tell me a little bit about what Vintage Tea Tours is and how you came up with this idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tea itself is very big in Ireland. It plays a massive part in our everyday lives, and afternoon tea is very fashionable at the moment. But quintessentially, tea in an Irish household is where you close the door behind you, you put the kettle on, everyone sits around the table, and it's just a time to relax. You know, we always stop for 11s in the morning. We always stop for a cup of tea and a chat. And I guess my grandmother was that quintessential Irish mammy, you know, who had time for absolutely everybody, who always had the kettle on, who always had a tin of biscuits hiding somewhere. And it was just a very, very social and inclusive moment of the day. So I think tea is very close to my heart. And actually taking a moment to, when times are simpler, you know, where you actually just stop and take in the day and take in the person that's in front of you. That was, I guess, the inspiration behind Vintage Tea Tours. And I saw an afternoon tea business in London that was something similar, and I really just thought that the Irish could put a great spin on having afternoon tea with people that you love and people that are special to you on a vintage 1960s bus. So we have an open platform, half cab bus, and it's just beautifully nostalgic to take in the sights of the city and stop for a moment and enjoy some tasty treats.
That sounds so amazing, because looking online at your website, this isn't just any bus. This is a beautifully restored double-decker, is it a Roadmaster bus?
Yeah, it's called a Route Master, and the one you're probably looking at is, we've named it after my granny. Her name is Pauline. So at the moment we have two fully restored vintage 1960 buses, double-decker buses in the fleet. One is Pauline and one is Kitty. And I don't know, there's so many memories hanging off the back of this beautiful bus, ringing the bell, grabbing onto the pole and running upstairs. There's just something so romantic about it. I love them.
And how did you decide that this was what you wanted to do with that afternoon tea memory and tradition, that you really thought, let's restore a bus?
I know, it's a bit of an odd one. Do you know, when you're driving around the city on the bus, people stop and look up and wave, and it is a moment. They literally stop you in their tracks. So there's just something magical about it, and it's really difficult to put your finger on it. And, when people are on board, they somehow, and maybe it's the tea, and maybe it's the nostalgia of the old bus, but they somehow open up and share stories, and, they're not on the phone clicking or searching or scrolling, or they're actually present. And I kind of think that's pretty rare in this day and age.
That's just, it sounds incredible. And the images that you get when you just think about rolling through Dublin in this antique bus are fabulous. So when people do this tea, they're getting this full afternoon tea experience. It's not just a cup of tea and a plate of biscuits coming out. What can people expect from the tea experience of the tour?
Yeah, so when you hop on board, because a lot of our guests will kind of say, okay, well, what actually is afternoon tea, vintage tea tour style? So when they book on, we have a traditional option, we have a gluten-free option, or we have a vegan option available. And when they hop on, their table that they've booked is set and ready for them. And we will have a scone, a freshly baked fruit scone with local Irish jam and clotted cream, and then we will have a selection of traditional finger sandwiches, depending on what's in season, and then we'll have another kind of course of sweets. So there'll be 4 or 5 sweet treats to finish off the afternoon tea experience, and of course bottomless tea or coffee on board. You sit back, you just listen to 1960s jazz, and you just take a moment.
And while you're going through Dublin in this amazing bus with this beautifully set and scrumptious tea in front of you, you're also getting a tour of the city. Can you speak a little bit about the tour and maybe a couple of the sites people would see, as well as your guides?
Yeah, we have our guides, our hosts are on board, and they're there to look after you and make sure that the cup never runs dry. But while we're driving through, we bring you through all of the main, historical areas in Dublin. So George in Dublin, past the cathedrals, past Guinness's, of course, through the Phoenix Park, and down the North Quays and up towards O'Connell Street. So all the main areas of the city, we take in. But instead of it being a full history tour, our guests and our get to enjoy our hosts' favourite stories of the city. So the things that are kind of close to them, maybe they'll bring in some personal history, or maybe they'll tell you about the fantastic characters in a certain area of Dublin. And there are so many fantastic pure history tours available in Dublin. We want to kind of give you guys something a little bit different. So our hosts will share their favourite stories of the city, which hopefully will become your favourite stories too.
And I've seen some of your hosts online. Your Instagram page is really, really active and so fun to keep an eye on. Your hosts just look adorable. I mean, they just seem adorable. So what goes into?
When you actually look forward to coming to work every day, because the guys are actually great, and they make sure that everybody has a good time on board.
So when you're looking at your hosts and hiring them, what is it? Is it their storytelling ability that you really look for? Is it their charm? Is it their interaction with people? How do you choose such, I don't know, they just seem energetic and bubbly and fun?
Yeah, the guys are actually really playful. And I think a lot of people, when they travel to Ireland, in a world where everything is going digital and everything is online and, self-touring and self-guiding, we really wanted to bring the Irishness against the tour. And people come to Ireland and they expect the crack and they expect the banter. So that is plentiful on board with the team that we have. And I think it's difficult not to be not for us to have a great time when our guests are too.
It looks like a really great experience, and I'm excited to experience it when I'm in Dublin next. So can you tell people, what is the best way for them to book that tour? Is it online? Is it to give a call? Is it to email?
Whatever suits. You can go online to our website, vintagetetours.ie, or we have a local and international number with call answering 24/7. So time zones are not an issue. Or you can just drop us an email. And we'll happily book you in.
Excellent. And as always, all these links and phone numbers can be found in the show notes. So all you have to do is click over to the website and get all your information on booking into the Vintage Tea Tours in Dublin. Now, Karen, I always ask my guests to share 3 places in Ireland that they think that visitors should add to their itinerary. Would you have a few places to recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So my 3 recommendations are all in Dublin, and they're places that I never ever get bored of and love visiting. And the first place, I'm actually from a little village just outside Dublin City called Howth, and there is a fantastic walking tour that is just mind-blowing called Shane's Howth Hikes, and I've done it as a family, and I've also done it with our team at Vintage Tea Tours. So to spend the day with Shane in this beautiful fishing village, just 11 kilometres from the city centre, is just spectacular. So that's definitely number 1 on my list. The second on my list is our Natural History Museum in Dublin City. Our museums are free of charge, and it's a museum within a museum. It's a Victorian building, and my children fondly call it the Dead Zoo, because there is fantastic Victorian animal species that have all been perfectly preserved, both Irish and international specimens, and it is just a fabulous experience. And the third is actually just Phoenix Park, which is our city park, which is a beautiful day out. We have a herd of fallow deer in the Phoenix Park, actually in the middle of the city, and it is just a fabulous place to take some fresh air in and take in some beautiful nature in the city.
You know, those are all just really exceptional recommendations for Dublin. I think that when people think of Dublin, you know, they think of the Guinness Storehouse, and they think of you know, just the things that really are forefront in their mind when, even if they Google Dublin City. So the hike in Howth and the Dead Zoo and Phoenix Park are all just really incredible recommendations if people have a few days to really dig in and enjoy Dublin. And then, of course, you know, you get the overview with the Vintage Tea Tour, and you're set.
Absolutely, and you'll be all set up for a fantastic time.
Excellent. Karen, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it, and this just sounds like an amazing experience for anyone visiting the city.
Thank you so much for having me again. I had a great time talking to you.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. If you want to see what a vintage tea tour is like, go ahead and click over to the show notes, because the day before this podcast goes live, I will have experienced vintage tea tours in Dublin myself, and I'm going to be sure to share quite a few photos on the post itself. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please do leave a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast host. Your reviews help other people find this podcast. Until next time, slán go fóill.